Bangladesh is one of the fastest growing economies, and is projected by most economists to continue its impressive growth throughout the 21st century. Situated in the historically prosperous Bengal region, it's a young nation that emerged only 50 years ago. Recently, Bangladesh hit global headlines as a result of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigning in the face of massive protests against her administration. One of the protesters' grievances was the quota-based system, which reserved 30% of government jobs for descendants of the resistance movement which helped create the country in 1971. The struggle for its existence has come to market. Originally constituting the eastern wing of Pakistan, it found its voice stifled by the government centered in the west. In March 1971, the charismatic activist leader Mujibur Rahman declared Bangladesh's independence. What happened next was chaos, as the Pakistani war machine moved across the country, unleashing death and destruction almost indiscriminately. Pakistan's arch-nemesis India got involved as the Bengal became the scene of a short but deadly conflict. In the end, the sacrifices made by the Bengali people were vindicated by their victory. The roots of Bengali independence can be traced back to the inception of Pakistan. In 1947, the British Raj ended and India was partitioned into two separate independent dominions, Muslim-majority Pakistan and Hindu-majority India. Pakistan itself was subdivided into two wings, West Pakistan and East Bengal, which were kept apart by over 1,600 kilometers. The western portion consisted of many ethnicities such as Pashtuns, Sindhis, Balochs and Punjabis, whilst the eastern portion was made up largely of ethnic Bengalis and had a large minority of Hindus as well. The west was 5 times larger in area, but the east had around 55% of the population. Economically, the eastern portion was more productive as well. In theory, the two wings were supposed to have parity, but in practice, this couldn't have been further from the truth. The central government was located in the western wing, where Karachi and then Islamabad served as the capital. As a result, political power was monopolized by the West, specifically by Punjabis who dominated the army and civil bureaucracy. The lack of political power was not lost upon the East Bengalis. Even in 1948, when Urdu was made the sole official language of Pakistan, the Bengali language movement rose up calling for the recognition of their language. In 1952, 10 Bengalis were killed protesting for the language movement. The struggle for Bengali to be granted official status paid off by 1956 when the government relented. This early event was to become symbolic of the oppressed position of the Bengalis at the hands of their Western brethren. Just a few months before, however, the central government in Karachi passed another bill that was once again interpreted by Bengalis as undermining their voice. In October 1955, the one-unit scheme enabled the 4 provinces in the west to merge into a single province, West Pakistan, whilst East Bengal was renamed to East Pakistan. The newly born nation was having real governance difficulties. Social unrest was rampant as protests and riots broke out in both wings. It didn't even have a constitution yet. Therefore, the official rationale was to give the central government greater autonomy, so that it could provide more efficient administration. This ran contrary to the rising Bengali desire for greater autonomy. In the 1954 East Bengal Legislative Assembly elections, the Muslim League, the party responsible for Pakistan's creation in the first place, was trounced in a landslide victory for the Bengali coalition, the United Front. From the perspective of the West Pakistani elites, a united Bengal with their huge population could exploit the lack of political unity of the various western provinces in future elections, as well as undermine national sovereignty with their calls for greater autonomy, which they feared might snowball into calls for independence. Interestingly enough, the one-unit scheme was initiated under Prime Minister Bogra, an ethnic Bengali. Herein lay another grievance, that Pakistan's leadership was monopolized by the West, and anytime a Bengali rose to a leadership position, he was quickly removed. Khwaja Nazimuddin was dismissed as Prime Minister after only 18 months, whilst Bogra held the position for a little over 2 years. Pakistan finally had a constitution in 1956, but this did little to slow the political turbulence, with the prime ministership changing hands 4 times over the next 2 years. By 1958, Pakistan's military were dismayed by the state of politics. The constitution had been abrogated and martial law was declared. So they decided to intervene and launch the first of the country's many military coups. Elections were already set to be held in 1959, but these were cancelled by the new president Ayub Khan, again stifling Bengali voices for representation. The economy of Pakistan actually grew massively during Ayub Khan's reign, with annual growth exceeding 5% at times, and the country becoming one of Asia's fastest growing economies. Private enterprise was encouraged, leading to small-scale industries emerging. Massive public work projects were initiated, with many major dams being built. Foreign capital flowed in and sparked growth in industries that supported consumer goods. Much of this economic progress was supported by foreign aid from the USA. During the Cold War, America and the USSR competed for new allies around the globe by promising material aid. Ayub Khan even announced major land reforms which restricted the size of land holdings. Many Pakistanis celebrated this as it would limit the political influence of the landed gentry. However, there were issues with the decade of development. The land reforms were not strictly adhered to, with over 6,000 landowners exceeding the defined limits. Even more problematic was the fact that the new wealth was concentrated in the hands of some 20 families that controlled 2/3 of industry and 3/4 of the banking sector. This was similar to what was taking place in neighboring Iran under the Shah. Most importantly, the 1960s highlighted the economic discrimination that was taking place against the Bengalis, as much of the foreign aid and subsequent increase in revenue was spent on West Pakistan. Considering that East Pakistan contributed more to the country's economy than its western counterpart, with the region being the epicenter of Pakistan's major exports, tea and jute, many Bengalis felt as if the fruit of their labor was withheld from them because of pure discrimination. Politically, Ayub Khan wanted to avoid the instability of civilian governments by centralizing authority. The country remained under martial law from 1958 until 1962. The new president viewed parliamentary democracy as having brought chaos, so in 1962 he gave Pakistan a new constitution which vested nearly all executive authority in the presidency. The constitution introduced what Ayub Khan called basic democracy, whereby a small number of basic Democrats, an initial number of 80,000 but later increased to 120,000, would vote members of the provincial and national assemblies. This was democracy only in name, as most of the basic Democrats were under his control. During Ayub Khan's reign, East and West Pakistan grew significantly apart. Both the martial law period and the subsequent basic democracy exacerbated Bengali desires for greater autonomy. Ayub had relied on a predominantly Punjabi army and civil bureaucracy to rule, fields that Bengalis were underrepresented in. The president actually held a deeply prejudiced view on his eastern citizens. This was typical amongst the Pakistani ruling class, specifically the military, with the two most popular tropes being that the Bengalis were not a martial race and that they were too heavily influenced by Hinduism. President Ayub's diaries, published after his death, confirmed these bigoted beliefs. This attitude had practical ramifications too, with Bengali calls for representation being emphatically repressed. Throughout the 1960s, the Rabindra Sangeet, songs composed by the polymath Tagore, were banned, serving as a symbol of the fight between East and West. In 1965, Pakistan went to war with India, resulting in a stalemate. Critically for our story, the war heightened resentment amongst the Bengalis, who felt as if their government had not provided sufficient security for East Pakistan against the threat of an Indian invasion, only dedicating limited army divisions to the region. After 1965, Ayub's regime faced increasing criticism, especially since the economy slowed down as well. In this time, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, a prominent activist leader within the most popular Bengali political party, the Awami League, rose to national fame as he called for greater autonomy for his people. He had been an activist since his teenage years, even campaigning with Mahatma Gandhi. East Pakistan would go on to become a hotbed of opposition to Ayub Khan. The following year in Lahore, Mujib put forward a plan that would eventually evolve into a movement around 6 main points. The most important of these were that universal suffrage should be restored and basic democracy abolished. But the point that scared the establishment the most was that East and West Pakistan should be 2 separate federal units with their own currency, fiscal and trade policies. Under Mujib's vision, the central government would only be responsible for defense and foreign affairs. Upon his return to East Pakistan, Mujib was greeted with widespread jubilation and popular support for the plan. That same year in 1966, he became the president of the Awami League. As the main opposition leader in the East, he now had a target on his back. A few months after his 6-point plan, he was arrested and imprisoned for nearly 3 years. In 1968, the Agartala conspiracy case was brought forward by the Pakistani government against Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and other prominent Bengalis, where they were accused of conspiring with India to secede and claim Bengali independence. Whilst this has been portrayed as an unfounded conspiracy case, in 2010, more than 4 decades after, Shaukat Ali, one of the surviving conspirators, confessed that the accusations were indeed true. Regardless, by the end of 1968, Pakistanis, both Western and Eastern, had had enough of the regime. Mass protests erupted, spearheaded by students and workers, culminating in Ayub Khan's deposal in March 1969. The Agartala conspiracy case had already been withdrawn the month before due to massive backlash from the Bengalis. Ayub Khan was replaced by another military officer, Yahya Khan, who announced a general election would be held the next year in 1970. A month before the elections, however, in November 1970, East Pakistan was struck by the deadliest cyclone ever recorded, killing up to 500,000 people. The government came under severe criticism for its poor response to the disaster. For the Bengalis, it highlighted what they knew all along: the government viewed them as unimportant. This sentiment carried over to the elections the next month, where Mujib's Awami League won 167 seats, whilst the PPP, the Pakistani People's Party, came in second place with 86. The election results showed just how polarized the West and East were becoming, as the Awami League won no seats in the West and the PPP won none in the East. This separation was further reinforced when the PPP's leader, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, refused to accept the results of Mujib's landslide victory. In East Pakistan, jubilation gave way to anger as the political deadlock prevented the formation of a government led by Mujib, who was increasingly becoming referred to as Banga Bandhu, friend of Bengal by his people. President Yahya Khan, also fearing Bengali separatism, tried to conciliate between Bhutto and Mujib. In the meantime, he postponed the formation of a Mujib-led government, sparking outrage in the East. On March 7, 1971, Mujib gave a historic speech to a gathering of up to 1 million people in Dhaka, calling upon his fellow Bengalis to initiate a civil disobedience movement. Many interpreted this as an informal declaration of Bangladesh's independence, especially since he ended his speech with, "The struggle this time is a struggle for our independence. Joy Bangla." By March 25th, the negotiations between Mujib and Bhutto failed to make any progress. So on that night, President Yahya Khan gave the order to launch Operation Searchlight, aimed at eliminating the Bengali nationalist movement. The official rationale for the crackdown was Bengali violence against Biharis, who tended to support West Pakistan. Mujib had resisted the urge to proclaim independence, but now he had no choice. So the very next day, on March 26th, in a telegram that was broadcasted by radio, he finally declared Bangladesh as an independent state. The war for Bangladesh's independence had begun. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was immediately arrested and thrown in prison in West Pakistan. But the Awami League political apparatus survived, as most of its high-ranking members moved to India. As the Pakistani army fanned out across its erstwhile eastern province, targeting key strategic locations of the nationalist movement like universities, a Bengali resistance movement rose up. Considering this force was unorganized and lacked leadership, it stood no chance against the Pakistani war machine. By May 1971, most of East Pakistan was under the army's control. This led to an exodus of Bengali refugees, up to 10 million seeking refuge in neighboring India. Seeing this as an opportunity to undermine its number one foe, as well as the need to resolve the material stress the new Bengali refugees were putting on its state, the Indian government, led by Indira Gandhi, decided to get involved. Already a Bengali guerrilla force had emerged, known as the Mukti Bahini. Indian military support in the shape of training, equipping, and advising turned the fight around. More and more trained fighters were sent back to attack and disrupt the Pakistani forces and their supply networks. These sabotage operations were successful in breathing life into the resistance movement, which was essential considering that by July it seemed as if the Pakistani army had asserted full domination across East Pakistan. In their quest to pacify the area, Pakistan recruited local Bengalis, mostly from Islamist backgrounds, to their cause and created paramilitary militias like the Razakars. From August onwards, the Mukti Bahini began to make more progress in their guerrilla operations. Subsequently, the army and Razakars intensified their reprisals on the civilian population. Right from the beginning of the insurgency in March, India had seriously considered direct involvement. The strain of the refugee influx was a massive concern for them, but they relented because of potential global backlash. But after signing a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union in August 1971, Indira Gandhi's government felt a lot more reassured about greater involvement in the Bengali struggle. India stepped up its support for the Mukti Bahini by actually sending troops to aid the Bengali resistance in battle. Pakistan, on the other hand, received support from the USA and China, both fearing Soviet domination of the region. Pakistan's position on the global stage was undermined by the atrocities they were committing. News outlets around the world were reporting on them, with some even describing them as genocidal. On December 3, 1971, Pakistan launched preemptive strikes on India, forcing the latter to declare open war. The Bengali struggle for independence would now be determined by the result of yet another Indo-Pakistani war. As the Pakistani military became more focused on fighting India in Kashmir and other fronts, the Mukti Bahini began to make rapid progress. With the help of the Indian army, they quickly overran much of the country. By mid-December, all that was left was the capital, Dhaka. The bloody conflict was to be bookended by large systematic executions of Bengali intellectuals, when, on December 14th, over 200 intellectuals were killed by the Pakistani army and its local collaborator, the Al-Badr group. On December 16th, with its forces in Dhaka completely exposed and surrounded, the Pakistani army signed the Instrument of Surrender. It was the largest surrender of personnel since World War II, as 93,000 Pakistani soldiers became prisoners of war. After decades of struggle to assert the Bengali right to self-determination, Bangladesh was born. Casualty figures vary greatly for the conflict, ranging from 300,000 to 3 million Bengalis, with the true number likely being on the lower end of that spectrum. Over the next year, most of the world recognized Bangladesh's sovereignty, Pakistan joining suit in 1974. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman would lead the new country until 1975, when he was assassinated in a military coup. Just like Pakistan, Bangladesh would seriously struggle for the next few decades with the role of the military in government. Nonetheless, these birthing pains, along with many others such as poverty and corruption, would likely have vindicated the decision of the Bengali national movement to assert its independence. Thank you guys for watching. As usual, a big thank you to my patrons for continuing to support the channel. Until next time, peace!